Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Frank's Amazin Podcast. I'm your host, Frank Gino. I'm very tired right now. I just got back from watching the final game of the three-game set that the Mets wrapped up against the Chicago Cubs. And, you know, this is definitely going to be a sad podcast because I'll tell you what, this was a very sad night. I would just, fast forward my main takeaway from going to this game was that in the seventh inning, Jacob DeGrom, he was on a huge roll, retired a bunch of guys in a row. And I saw his pitch count, and it was in the 70s. And I'm saying to myself, with the way DeGrom is pitching right now, with what his pitch count is, I would just let him pitch the whole game, honestly. With the way the bullpen has been very inconsistent because, last night they had the six scoreless innings, and they're not going to do that well in back-to-back nights because they're not going to be as rested. And honestly, it was just kind of luck because we know how bad this bullpen actually is. So I would have been perfectly okay with DeGrom throwing the whole game. But all of a sudden, before you know it, this is another big thing. Ahmed Rosario comes up with another error, and this was an easy play that he tried a backhand and he flat out dropped the ball. And he messed up in the first inning of yesterday's game with Noah Syndergaard on the mound. I know it was raining, but still, you didn't see the Cubs kicking the ball over the place. And in both scenarios, errors by Amed Rosario turned out into big innings for the Cubs and the difference maker in both games. And when Carantini hit his second home run of the night, that was another thing. A backup catcher getting all the offensive production for the Cubs. Not exactly what you had visioned going into this game. Definitely not what I was expecting while I was there. But when Carantini hit that 3-run homer, I was like, you know what? I got a train to catch. It's late. I really don't want to watch any more of this. So I was walking out, and I don't know why, but as I was walking out, I was looking at the faces of all the Met fans that were there, and they all had the same face. And it's a face that I can't really do on the spot. It's something that is in the moment. And in that moment, we were all feeling the same thing. We were all feeling frustration, disappointment, exhaustion, kind of, after how crazy this season has been, but it definitely was a bit of sadness. I mean, you could just see it. Everybody just looked so out of it. They looked zapped, you know what I mean? It was like something came into the stadium and just zapped all the Met fans. And that was Victor Caratini with his homers. Because I'll tell you what, going into the game, right before that started, the place was buzzing. I mean, I literally felt the buzz. Like, you could just hear it. You could feel it. And when Caratini hit that homer, it was just gone. The place was relatively quiet at the time because here's the other thing that really boggled my mind. There were so many Chicago Cub fans at this game. I could not believe it. I was like, where are all these Cub fans coming from? Because here's the thing. Chicago is not across the street. That is not a 2-hour drive or a 3-hour drive. That is quite a hike. Now, obviously, they're not all from Chicago. And I think that the Cubs have a decent fan base for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's probably a good amount of front runners, honestly, because the Cubs, the Mets beat them in the playoffs in 2015. Cubs come back to win the World Series in 2016. And, they're a perennial playoff team, even though they lost game 163 and, the wild card game and all that fun stuff at the end of last year. But still, they're always a competitive team. They have a really good young core, good manager, good general manager, all that stuff. So the Cubs are a good team. And they're a good team to be a fan of. So I imagine that there's a good amount of front running going on there. But the other thing is that prior to the Cubs winning the World Series in 2016, you have to remember, everybody knows they had the biggest curse, the biggest drought for getting, winning the World Series and what have you. And they ended up becoming the lovable losers because of how bad they were at times. And people were just saying, eventually the Cubs are just going to pull it off one day. So people they rooted for the underdog. And honestly, that's kind of similar to being a Met fan because most of the time, as everybody knows, you're not winning. And you're usually, this season is one of your better seasons in recent memory because it's more so like the past couple of years where you're way out of it early in the season and there's nothing really to look forward to at the end, which was the same thing that happened last year, and it looked like it was going to happen this year until the Mets went on the big run. But now, it's going to be very, very difficult because all year, one of the things I've been talking about is the head-to-head matchups and being able to capitalize on that. And the Mets failed to do that in the worst way possible by getting swept by the Cubs. And I don't know, just the sequence of events is so crazy. And the way how you could feel drastically different about the team in less than 24 hours is like so problematic to me. Because I remember the Thursday game against the Indians. Once the Mets won, I was like, again, like I said at the end of the Indians podcast, I actually felt good going into the Braves series, and that was crazy. But I just said to myself, listen, Cleveland is a good team. They have a really good record. They've been good in the second half, all these different things. And like sweeping them in a series, I just think that'd be a nice win for the Mets because we know that they have not really been the upper echelon teams consistently in this recent stretch, this past month, let's just say, because they capitalized on the Marlins or the Pirates or the Padres. Again, a couple miracles against the Nationals. Did not do well against the Braves in Atlanta. And then in this case, they were playing Atlanta again. And again, I felt good about them on Thursday. Again. I know I keep saying it, but on Thursday, I felt good going into it, even though the whole rain thing happened and what have you. But then on Friday, when they just didn't score any runs besides DeGrom hitting a home run himself, and the fact that they went 14 innings without scoring any runs against Mike Foltynewicz with the ERA above 6, and they couldn't put across anything, right away I was like, has this team improved? Because this is like typical Met stuff. This is things that they were doing last year every single time Jacob deGrom was on the mound. They would only give him one run, if that, and they just put him in a very hard position. That's why he wasn't able to get many wins, but he was able to overcome it, make the most of it, and still win a Cy Young. And that was the case in tonight's game. The Mets only scored one run, and that one run came in the first inning on a nice home run from J.D. Davis. And Davis is a little bit tricky, since we're on the subject of him. He's been weird this series, honestly. Like, he's had his home runs, don't get me wrong, and I know everybody loves the home run ball. I get it. I'm pretty sure, actually, I know that Davis homered in every single game of this series. So he had a home run. But the thing is that they lost all 3 games by 3 runs. All 3 of J.D. Davis' home runs were solo shots. And for the first game and the second game, they really were meaningless. I mean, the game was already over. You knew the Mets weren't going to be able to come back. And that's when J.D. hit those homers. But in the third game, tonight's game, he hit a home run in the first inning. So that was before the Caratini stuff happened. And that was the only offensive production for Jacob deGrom, and that was just very disappointing. This was my first time seeing deGrom in person, and he looked really good when he was getting all those guys out in a row. And it just happened so quickly, the way Rosario drops the ball. Then another play gets in between McNeil and Rosario up the middle. And then before you know, Caratini stepped through on home runs, like game over. Really disappointing. And the other thing that the Mets really, really messed up, not only in the Atlanta series, but in this series even more so. The amount of times that they stranded runners on base was just a nightmare, because there were innings where you would just have, 2 on, however many outs, you strand them. Then the very next thing, you'll have 2 on again, you leave them there. And it was just inning after inning, all these opportunities, and they did not capitalize on any of them. The same thing was happening in this game I went to. Alonso draws a walk, maybe somebody gets an infield single or whatever, or Ramos gets a hit, and Michael Conforto leaves him there. Or Michael Conforto gets on, and Todd Frazier leaves him there. So all these different things combined, it ends up being the difference maker in these close games, because even though the Cubs scored 10 runs last night, and they scored 5 runs the night before, what's really wild to me is that all 3 of these games were decided by 3 runs. And I just feel that had you done the little things, if you drove in a couple runs here or there instead of stranding them, you could win all these games. And that's the other thing, is that you want to say season is over. Probably. It's going to be really hard to make another miracle comeback. And it's just like they're in these games. That's what's so frustrating, is that they could win and that they're capable of more, but they just don't do it. And for me, I talk about Rosario dropping the ball, and you could blame the rain last night, but I just saw the Mets make so many mistakes over this homestand. And the one that still stands out to me is the play where in the Atlanta series where J.D. Davis picks up, just a base hit to left field, and Billy Hamilton scores from first base because for some reason J.D. Davis wants to pump fake throw it to the cutoff man, which there was just no point in doing. And without realizing it, being completely asleep and unaware, Billy Hamilton is racing home, and it was just an embarrassing run and give up, worse than a Little League type run. And that's just the little things that if you want to be a playoff team, you absolutely cannot be doing. And I just feel that the Cubs, I feel like they kind of either stress defense or they just have really good defensive players because they were not making errors in this series. They have solid fielders all around the diamond. Rizzo was hurt this whole series with some back tightness that flared up against the Nationals in the series over the weekend, but he's a really good defensive first baseman. Then you have Javi Baez, El Mago, in Spanish, the magician. He's a great defensive shortstop. Chris Bryant, he makes the routine plays at third base. Jason Hayward is a great defensive outfielder. Nicholas Castellanos is a good defensive outfielder. And then tonight they were using Tony Kemp in left field, and he got to every ball because of his great speed. And then when healthy, Wilson Contreras behind the dish, he has an absolute cannon for an arm. So the Cubs, they're able to play defense, and they don't, randomly drop balls at shortstop or third base or first base. We saw Alonso make another mistake at first tonight. Or pump faking to the cutoff man in left field. We never see that type of stuff from the Cubs because they get the little things right. And that's not the only reason why the Cubs are higher in the record books than the Mets are. But it's just that if you add up playing defense correctly, getting runners in when they're in scoring position, and having a competent bullpen, some sense of consistency, and a good manager, all these things together, you become a playoff team. And my thing is that, if you want to be a playoff team, you got to beat the playoff teams because, you could beat the Marlins. And, you could beat the Royals. You could beat the White Sox, all these different teams. But if you get swept by the Braves and you get swept by the Cubs, there's just no chance, honestly. Because now that these head-to-head matchups went so bad, the Cubs, they got a nice lead on the Mets now at 5 games. And the problem is that the Mets have to be right back at it Friday night in Philadelphia. And it's so ironic that I remember the weekend series, the last time the Mets played the Cubs in Chicago, that was a really big series for the Mets to get into the wild card race, what have you. They did not do very well. And the next series was against Philadelphia. And that was a big series. See how you could bounce back, and the Mets get swept. So, once again, after they lose the big series to the Cubs, they have to play the Phillies again. And I don't feel good about the Phillies series at all, because the Phillies have been hot, the Mets have been cold, and it's in Philadelphia. That's just not a fun place to be. And I imagine the Mets definitely having their struggles, especially because Jacob deGrom obviously won't pitch in this series. He just pitched last night. Not that it really matters because the Mets usually don't even win when deGrom pitches. Couple of other things is, you want to talk about deGrom, them not scoring runs for him, but at least deGrom still pitches a good game because you know what? I know the Mets can't really do anything about it now, but I am so tired of watching Marcus Stroman. I mean, honestly, every start with him, it's always excuses, and it's just not very good. He gives you, on the first game of the series on Tuesday, 6 innings of 6 hits, 4 runs, couple walks, 7 strikeouts, 96 pitches. Just not going to get it done. You can't be giving up 4 runs. And what drives me nuts about Stroman in every single outing is that the first few innings he looks really good. He gets a lot of strikeouts, good pitch count, weak contact, all these different things. And he's pitching good. And you're like, okay, Stroman looks like he's settled in. He's going to pitch a good game for the Mets tonight. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the innings, whether it's the 4th inning, 5th inning, 6th inning, whatever, in this case, it was the 5th inning and 6th inning, the guy just blows up, and then he gives up hit after hit, base runner after base runner, and some runs score. And before you know it, that's it. He just, you think that once a pitcher gets into a groove, that they'll pitch the rest of the night good. I mean, it's usually the opposite with a lot of pitchers. We will see times where a guy may give up a few runs in the first couple of innings, but then they pitch really good for the rest of the game. With Stroman, it's the complete opposite, and that is something that, again, I just feel like we really don't see. But it didn't matter that much because the offense in that game was very limited. You get a hit from Rosario, McNeil taking it over. Alonso, he hits a solo home run. Michael Conforto gets a hit. Ramos gets a couple hits. Davis gets that solo home run at the end, but 2 strikeouts. So even though Ramos got 2 hits, J.D. Davis was leaving him there. Joe Panic going over 4. I want to talk about him. And then, of course, Todd Frazier going over 2. I want to talk about him as well. So let's start with Joe Panic. After the Cleveland series, I was talking really highly about Panic. Had been doing well with the Mets, which was true. Was batting .340. All of a sudden, his average is back to the 260s, 250. I don't know what it is now because since he doesn't have that many at-bats as a Met, the number just fluctuates like crazy. So all of a sudden, Joe Panic is not looking as attractive to the team as he originally did. Right now, his average is at 268. But, he was a guy that I was kind of looking forward to, someone that I thought was really going to be able to help the Mets against these better teams because of his ability to put the ball in play and just the fact that he was getting hits. He obviously is not doing that anymore as his average dropped almost 100 total points. Again, not very many at-bats, so the batting average is going to fluctuate very, very quickly. He could have like a multi-hit game and all of a sudden he could be right back near 300. So still, he is cold even though he was hot. The same can be said for Ahmed Rosario. He's not hitting nearly as well as he was. You knew he wasn't going to be able to keep it up because he had an average in 571 in 6 games. I think that was the number. But then he, gets a hit here or there, but he also will strike out a couple of times, which he did in that first game of the series, going 0 for 3 with 2 strikeouts. And then when you're watching him making errors last night, made an error tonight, he just looks like old Ahmed Rosario again, which is not good because he was someone that I talked about. Like, it looked like he had finally got over the hump, finally the player that he's supposed to be, hitting better, fielding better. And it's so ironic that I happen to be watching MLB Network after this Tuesday game, and Harold Reynolds, former MLB infielder, did a whole breakdown on how Ahmed Rosario has improved defensively, getting in front of the ball, showing the differences in his approach to fielding in the beginning of the season when he was making errors against the Cardinals and the Brewers in April, till now where he's not making nearly as many errors. And it's just so crazy that the very next 2 games, he looked like old Ahmed Rosario again from April where he's making errors all over the place. So that was not good at all. And just the fact that it cost the team in both games with Syndergaard and DeGrom, that is not good at all because one of the things that concerns me is that obviously the Mets have a very inconsistent offense. We could tell that in this series. They'll put together 1 run or only a couple runs. Then they'll put together 7 runs like they did in the middle game of the series. So you just never know what you're going to get out of the offense. And it's still supposed to be a team that is built on starting pitching, especially after acquiring Marcus Stroman. It just sounds like on paper that a rotation of DeGrom, Syndergaard, Stroman, Matz, Wheeler sounds like a good starting rotation. A team that's built on starting pitching. But the problem is that their defense is not built around starting pitching. With all the mistakes they make, there is no defensive position you really can mess around with. But if you have a shortstop who can't make routine plays, I mean, that is just so problematic because the shortstop has such a big responsibility in that infield trying to get to all the different plays, especially when the third baseman is slow as a turtle and can't move. So you need range going in that direction. And for most of the season, you had Robbie Cano at second base, and he's got no range as well. So Ahmed Rosario has to be all over the field trying to make up for the lack of range of these other old infielders. And he did not do a very good job of that with all the errors he has made. And obviously, Pete Alonso is not Keith Hernandez at first base. He makes his fair share of errors, but he makes up for it with his 42 home runs. And for Rosario, his offense was just as bad, especially with his chase rate, swinging at pitches out of the strike zone, with these multi-hit games, and his average now is still 288. You know what? If you told me before the season Ahmed Rosario was going to hit 288, I would have been really, really happy with that. So I'm not going to kill him too much for the hitting, but still, it's just like you can't have a team that's built on starting pitching if you have Ahmed Rosario making all these mistakes at shortstop. Because no matter how good Syndergaard pitches or how good DeGrom pitches, it doesn't matter because if Rosario drops the ball, it could mess up the whole inning. And Noah Syndergaard, in that middle game of the series, I'm actually really, really disappointed in him because, yes, Rosario made a bad play. It really probably cost the Mets the game. But I just feel that Syndergaard is such a good pitcher. He should be able to overcome that and be like, all right, it's just one play. Let me just strike this guy out or get them to pop up, whatever. Get out the inning, not let an avalanche happen. I mean, this was something that we see out of Steven Matz in the past, where something would go weird, whether it's a bad call or an error in the field, and then Matz would blow up and you lose the game because he had a really bad inning. And Noah Syndergaard did the same exact thing. And this game was just so important for the team after they lost the first game of the series with Sherman pitching and, getting swept by the Braves. That didn't help. So a big game for Syndergaard. You would like for him to perform. He had been red hot going into this game. He's getting deep into games, not giving up runs, quality starts, all these different things. And then he comes into this really big game and he has his worst game. Honestly, other than the Nationals game where he got hurt, this was the worst game of his career. I mean, when you think about the magnitude of this game, this is the worst game of Noah Syndergaard's career, and it better not happen again, because what bothers me is that I watched Noah Syndergaard be the only pitcher who won a World Series game for the Mets and pitched pretty good in the playoffs. And he pitched good in the wild card game. So it's not like Noah Syndergaard cannot handle the big moment. That is not the case at all. It just so happens that he got beat up against the Cubs. Whether Rosario made a bad play or not, I still just expect Syndergaard to be able to overcome it and not give up 9 runs. You know what I mean? It was 9 earned, 10 total, but still 9 earned runs. That just isn't Noah Syndergaard at all. Only being able to go 3 innings. And that's also something that's worth really looking at, because if a guy, obviously Syndergaard did not have it because it started in the first inning and it happened again in the second inning. So right away you knew Noah Syndergaard did not have his best stuff. And when you know the games are this important, before you let the game become 10-1, it would be nice if you go to your bullpen. I know the Mets don't have a true long reliever, which is why I was kind of opposed to trading Vargas, because at least you have a guy who could come in and give you some length, and then you could go to Paul Sewald, who's actually been pretty good, and Brad Brock, who did very well in this game. Edwin Diaz struck out the side. Of course the bullpen was lights out. Completely lights out since Noah Syndergaard pitched terrible. Why wouldn't they be? But still, I just think having a long reliever in these type of scenarios would be very helpful. Also, when the Mets had the 14-inning game against the Braves, you'd also like a long reliever to pitch some of those innings. This way you don't have a completely tired bullpen for the rest of the series, because that was the first game of the series and it just kind of had a snowball effect on the team being tired in general, and it just wasn't very good at all. And then the other 2 things before I go, I'll probably mention other things, but the other 2 things that stood out to me tonight was just like the way the lineup is constructed. And, I see Ramos, he's having a really good stretch right now. His average is up to 292, so he's playing more like the guy I was expecting when the Mets originally signed him. He's still not quite there yet, because this is just one hot streak in the month of August. I want to see what he does in September. But with Ramos hitting well, Alonso, he draws his walks every now and then, still has, him and JD both have really good on-base percentages. And so does Jeff McNeil. So, here's my thing right here. So Jeff McNeil has a .399 on-base percentage. That's really good. JD Davis, .366. That's pretty good. And Pete Alonso at .365. That's good. All these are very good on base percentages. Then you have Ramos with his .292 average, .352 on base percentage, so he's getting on. Kafur's got .360 on base percentage. So you got all these guys that can get on base, even though they didn't get on base that much in this game. Right after that, you have Todd Frazier and Juan Lagares. And what does Frazier do tonight? 0 for 4 to strikeout, stranding a bunch of base runners. And Juan Lagares 0 for 3 to strikeout. And now their averages for the season. Todd Frazier down to 230 after having a multi-hit game in this series, and Juan Lagares is down to 210, so his hot bat completely gone. He's ice cold again. Back to being vintage Lagares, which is do absolutely positively nothing offensively. And the other thing is that Juan Lagares made a very nice play early in the game on a line drive from Javi Baez. He made a great catch that if he wasn't out there, Mets probably don't make, and you thought, maybe that could have been a difference play. But the thing is that you play Juan Lagares for defense, but your defense still stinks because you have Ahmed Rosario and Pete Alonso and JD Davis out there. So it doesn't really matter. It's like if you want to be a defensive team, you kind of need an all-defensive lineup. If you want to be an offensive team, you need an all-offensive lineup. And the Mets don't really have that many alternatives on the bench right now. And what is really, really getting me angry, honestly, is the fact that Brandon Nimmo and Jet Lowry are hitting all these home runs in rehab games in the minor leagues. And it's like, what the heck are the Mets waiting for? The guys are clearly healthy. They could clearly play. Brandon Nimmo's playing center field, you know what I mean? No problem. What are we waiting for? We are letting the season slip away. We're falling further and further behind the Cubs and other teams in the National League wild card while we just let these guys hit bombs, use up, I guess their hot streaks maybe in the minor leagues. I know minor leagues means absolutely nothing to the major leagues, but still, I just believe that Jed Lowry is going to hit better than Todd Frazier and Brandon Nimble's going to hit better than Juan Lagares. That seems like everybody knows it, but it's just like, if everybody knows it, why don't they do it? That's what really gets to me, is that like if it seems like such an obvious, easy solution, why wouldn't the Mets do it? Because the other thing that's problematic is that they keep saying they're waiting for Brandon Nimmo to do back-to-back days of center field. And the problem is that he was supposed to do another game of center field tonight after playing last night, but then Mickey Cowher says, he has a scheduled day off. Well, how many scheduled day off does Brandon Nimmo need? Because if he keeps doing it, he's never going to get the 2 games in a row. The season's going to be over by the time he finally gets 2 games in a row. And my thing is, even if Nimmo and Lowry came back tomorrow, let's just say, for the Philadelphia series, they're not. But let's just say they did. If they couldn't play every single day because they're not fully healthy or whatever, I don't care. At least they're playing every now and then. Here's my thing. It's better to have Nimmo and Lowry play like 1 or 2 games of a series than have them play no games at all and just have to deal with Lagares and Frazier the whole series doing nothing. At least I got something in those 1 or 2 games that they could play. They can have all the scheduled days off they want. But if they're going to be hitting home runs, I would like for them to be doing it for the major league team, not for the minor league team. Again, no guarantee they're going to do it, but there is a guarantee that Lowry's better than Frazier, Nimmo better than Lagares, and I just feel that with Rosario having the good offensive year and McNeil doing well and Davis above 300, Alonso his great year, Ramos has a hot bat, Conforto, he gets on base every now and then. I just feel that with all those things being considered, if you had Nimmo batting and Lowry batting instead of Frazier and Lagares, you'd actually be able to drive those guys in when they get on base instead of stranding them. Because the other thing is that Frazier and Lagares, they're not good contact hitters. Frazier strikes out a ton. I mean, look at the guys' averages. Frazier hitting 230, Lagares hitting 210. These guys leave so many base runners every single game. It's just so bad. And the thing is with Brandon Nimmo, he's another person with a high on base percentage. So that's another guy who's getting on base a lot. And then you hope that Jed Lowry is who he's supposed to be, a guy that could get hits, that he would get hits with runners on base. You score runs, you win ball games. And that's it. You know what I mean? That should be the recipe. And at this point, it's like, again, I don't expect much out of the Philadelphia series. And then the other thing is that right after that, they go straight to Washington. I mean, this has been a brutal stretch of games with no days off. I mean, they really front-loaded the days off because think of the schedule right now. They had Monday off, great, but Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then they have the Thursday game off right before they come back home for the Phillies. But still, just the fact that they had to do the Braves, the Cubs, then travel to Philadelphia, and then travel to Washington all consecutively, that is a really, really brutal stretch of games without having any days off. So, again, I don't see either one of those series going well. So by the time they come back, they have Philly at home, which still won't be easy. Arizona, I mean, there's no easy games here. Then the Dodgers, I mean, they're the best team in the National League. They'll probably be resting guys, so that might go okay. Coors Field, you never know what the heck is going to happen there because no matter how bad the Rockies do, the Mets could still easily lose there because they just do that at Coors Field. You go to Cincinnati, another tough place because that's Great American Small Park. Very easy to hit home runs, and the Reds have some hot hitters between Eugenio Suarez and Artudis Aquino, the young outfielder that's been setting records for home runs and a certain amount of plate appearances. So the Reds are a tough matchup. Then you get the Marlins, who are going to play tough no matter what, and you finish the season against the Braves. So I just don't see any more pieces in the schedule where the Mets could go on a little bit of another run to get back in it. And unless Nimmo and Lowry come back like really soon and play out of this world, and all these other hitters I mentioned, the young, core 5 and Ramos, keep doing their thing and just getting on base, getting hits, pretty good averages, hitting home runs for the power hitters, Alonso, Conforto. As long as they're doing that, they could finally be a capable offense. Hopefully they could do it consistently, all at the same time. That would be ideal. And then Marcus Stroman needs to get his act together and finally pitch good. He keeps saying he'll be better, he'll be better. But what are we waiting for? He has not been better. Zach Wheeler, I still don't know what is going on. Very inconsistent. Matz has been good. DeGrom has been good. But that just isn't enough. And then with the bullpen, Edwin Diaz, he looks good, then he looks bad, then he looks good. Jerry Familia, same thing. A lot of inconsistencies surrounding this team. That is why they've had an inconsistent season, inconsistent players. So, I don't know. I just feel like what I saw from the faces of the fans and just the way the team here's the other thing, is that like after Caratini hit that homer, the Mets didn't even get on base the rest of the game. You know what I mean? Like 7th inning done, 8th inning done, 9th inning done. Like not only was the life sucked out of the fans, you felt like it was sucked out of the players too, and that they kind of just didn't really have it anymore. And I know that Philly is going to be all revved up and ready to get him because Philly is much closer to the wild card than the Mets are, so they're going to be trying really hard to get it and make the playoffs because they have high expectations after all the money they spent in the offseason, particularly with the signing of Bryce Harper, the acquisition of JT Realmuto, Gene Segura, among others. So it definitely will be an interesting series to watch, see how much fight the Mets do have, because that's one thing Callaway says and that you can say about them is that they do fight. They went on the run, and they're going to have to do it again, which is really unfortunate. You were hoping that you weren't going to need to do that again. You thought you had got it out the way. But I'll be able to talk about it after the Philly series. Excuse my tiredness and being kind of wacky or whatever, but I just wanted to do it while I was fresh in my mind with what I saw. Have a good one, everybody.